10. Into the gloaming. Awake in the wee morning hours on the third day since I'd strolled with Thalaja, and 2 days after I'd penned the decree and sent the man to the spire, I bustled quietly around my chambers, gathering the items I'd collected surreptitiously over the last days. Though I'd laid in bed for what seemed the longest night of my life, I hadn't slept. I felt some relief that the guards had apprehended the culprit who'd poisoned Corwine, yet my nerves still bundled in my stomach and spun anticipation throughout my mind. At the cleaning table, beside the basin, I filled a water skein from the pitcher Mother Feathergala had filled late yesterday, also at my behest. I didn't know how early she and Doreen would arrive to prepare for the day, but after every item I packed, I went to the front of my rooms to check for their arrival, hoping that Thalaja would come before. With my pack sealed, I stepped onto the balcony, but remained close enough to the secret passageway to hear a knock. The crisp air chilled my skin, and across the sky, the full moon hung above the spires of the citadel, a yellow halo within the deep purple night. At odds with the stillness of the pre-dawn hours, blood raced through my veins, a steady pulse beat in my ears, and I fidgeted as I waited. I twitched at every sound and jumped when the small scratching sound startled me from inside, a noise a rodent would make as it pawed at the ground for grubs. But it wasn't an animal. It came from behind the art that hid the secret passage. I went. When I opened the hidden door, Thalaja was holding an orb of dancing bluish lightning high to light the dark stairwell. "Get your things. It's time." I retrieved my pack and returned. Stepping inside, I pulled the painting closed and tried to turn in the tight space. Thalaja stopped me so he could appraise my pack, then gave a small, satisfied smile and asked, "You have the totem?" I grasped the end of the thong hanging at my neck. It had remained there since my time at the House of Healing, a token as important as the other ones that represented the souls of my parents. At my nod, he turned. I held a hand on the wall to steady myself as we descended countless stairs. Outside, under Selen's watch, I called the wind and lowered us to the grass behind a copse of trees. Thalaja scanned the area, tilted his head, and made for the city's gates. We moved precisely as planned, and would meet the remainder of the party at Storm's Keep's exit. Not another person stirred within the streets at the gods' forsaken early hour. Thalaja walked with purpose, in silence, but glanced over his shoulder several times to ensure I kept pace. He deftly maneuvered through the narrow cobbled streets, past the House of Healing, around homey neighborhoods, and between the shops at the market. It seemed he could make this way blindfolded. For my part, I couldn't break concentration long enough to ask questions, though they stirred in my agitated mind. When we arrived at the stables, I slowed, expecting that we'd meet the others inside and gather horses for the journey. Thalaja turned back to me, grabbed my wrist, and pulled me forward. I resisted. "Aren't we meeting the others?" I asked. "I sent word to the others last night to meet here at 7th bell. I plan to be well away before that hour. Pull up your hood and come on." Beyond the stables, facing the guardhouse, I stopped. "What about the guards? Didn't you just mention that our departure would be in secret?" Thalaja rounded back on me and pulled me into the shadows. "I've staffed the night watch with only those I trust. Rorine and Galen lead the shift." I shifted my gaze uncertainly. "What is it, Mairynne?" he asked, clearly growing short with my reluctance. "Maybe," I started. He quirked a brow. "Maybe this isn't the best idea," I admitted. In the depths of my soul, I knew it was my path, that I was meant to travel this road, and that this journey was what Zephrine had spoken of when she read my fate in the herbs. So why, as I stood on the very precipice, did I fear what we faced? Thalaja sighed. "Mairynne, your determination persuaded even me. So you're not turning back now. But time is important. Your doubts will wait until we're at a safe distance. What if we're discovered? It's early enough that no one will know immediately, and I trust my guards to keep this quiet until after someone notices your absence in the castle. It will take several hours." He pressed his lips together, then narrowed the distance between us and lowered his voice. "What you're feeling is what the Frostfighters call the spirit of home's hearth. It's fear of facing something you don't know, but you've convinced even me of your need to go, and as the one charged with your very protection, I've the most reason for objection." Glancing down, I said, "But what if this is exactly what Father did and never returned?" "Do you really believe that?" He raised his brows. I shook my head. If Father had left willingly, he would have come back to his duty and his people. The stone burned the delicate skin beneath my shift, emphasizing the rightness of my conclusion. "Then trust me, and you'll be better by the time we enter the forest." After another doubtful thought, I decided to put away my misgivings, pulled my hood over my head, and gave him the trust he'd earned by his service to me and my father before. At the guardhouse, Rorine smiled widely. He and Thalaja clasped arms. Thalaja asked, "Do you have them?" "Aye, we do," the guard answered. Galen stepped forward with a belt holding 2 holstered scimitines, weapons I knew well from having observed my first guard wield them in the training yards. Others used short or longer straight swords based on their fighting styles, and some fought with daggers or a longbow. My first guard was the only one who dared use the small curved blades as a weapon. I expected he'd strap the belt at his waist, but the 3 guards turned to me. I looked from face to face, unclear of their expectation. Galen guffawed after seeing my reaction. "Lift your cloak, Kogo." The woman stood taller than both Thalaja and Rorine, and wore her hair cut bluntly at her chin. I'd seen her before, but never this close. Her forehead was a bit too broad for her face, but her mouth was soft. Her bold laugh made me like her immediately, and I did as she said. She strapped the belt at my waist and stepped back. "Don't take those out until someone shows you what to do with them. I'd hate to see you lose a hand or something worse." I nodded. Of course, I would need something for protection, but it would have made more sense to give me something easier to use. Reality set in. My journey had started, and I was going alone into the world with only Thalaja. My heart patter could have been from thrill or anxiety, which I couldn't tell. We walked past the gates that had held my entire life up until that moment, as Otar's first light painted a line across the horizon. We veered to the right, met the northern branch of the Sundai River, and followed it south. A sense of freedom I'd imagined for months settled over me, and feelings of, not happiness, but something for which I had no accurate words lightened my steps. A truth, mayhap? But that seemed a weak explanation. At the very least, it contained purpose. And my purpose felt right. Mayhap it was my imagination, but on the wind, I heard my father's voice. "Truth to thine self first." This has been Call of the Storm Sorcerer, The Serpentine Throne, Book 1. Written by Susan Stradiato. Narrated by Kim Churchill. Copyright 2021 by Susan Stradiato. Production copyright 2023 by Susan Stradiato. Thank you for listening.